So another theory that we do want to understand before we start moving on, another way of understanding and interpreting behavior, is the classical conditioning theory. So this is not a molar theory, meaning it's not kind of a big picture look. This is a molecular theory, meaning that it's looking at very small moments of associative learning that build over time that create the behaviors that our dogs exhibit and people exhibit. So classical conditioning, sometimes it's referred to as Pavlovian conditioning, is going all the way back to Ivan Pavlov. Most people have heard the story of Pavlov's dogs. Ivan Pavlov was a Russian scientist in the 1800s who trained dogs to salivate at the ring of a bell by feeding them every time the bell rang. He did a lot of other things to dogs. We're not going to talk about those, but this is the thing that he's known for. So classical conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning, when Pavlov was conducting these experiments, he got the dogs to drool at the sound of a bell by feeding them every time the bell rang. Rang the bell, fed the dogs. Rang the bell, fed the dogs. Rang the bell, fed the dogs. And then he rang the bell and he did not feed the dogs. And the dogs drooled all over the floor in anticipation of food. And we sit there and say, well, I'd probably do the same thing if the guy did that to me. But the power is in the fact that they weren't whining, they weren't jumping, they weren't spinning, they weren't wagging their tails, they were drooling. And drooling is not something that you can control. They were having an involuntary physiological response to a sound that previously meant nothing to them. So Ivan Pavlov is not ridiculously famous because he got dogs to drool at the sound of a bell. He's ridiculously famous because he discovered mind control. We're going to use a little bit of mind control in our course here. So we're going to be utilizing classical conditioning through the use of markers. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily know what a marker word is, but they've heard of a clicker. A clicker is a marker. I'm not going to have you use a clicker here because I want to have a variety of markers. The clicker, unfortunately, can only be conditioned for one. So we're going to use our voices today. We're going to save a little bit of money on a clicker, and we're going to learn how to apply these markers correctly. So I'm going to have 3 specific markers that do 3 specific things. You really shouldn't have any more markers than that unless you're doing some specialty work like service work or something like that. 3 markers is plenty. So our first marker, and I do apologize if I wind up spelling a lot of these because I'm just in the habit of doing so when dogs are in the room, but our first marker is going to be our YES marker. This is going to be your terminal marker, your release marker. It's going to tell the dog, we are done and you are going to receive a reward. Okay, so YES is paired with a reward, and we do that often. And what happens to the brain over time? If we say the word YES and pair it with a reward, eventually the dog starts saying, I get a reward when I hear that word, right? And so we start training the brain to have a flux of dopamine and energy. By pairing the YES with the reward often enough, later on down the road, I can say YES to the dog and the dog will feel rewarded whether I reward them or not. That's a pretty powerful thing when it comes to the game of rehabilitation. So our YES is going to be the marker that says, all done, you're going to go ahead and get a reward, okay? Our next marker is our duration marker. It means keep doing what you're doing, right? We're going to have a good marker here. Good means, I like what you're doing, but I'd want you to continue doing it. We can use this for obedience. We can tell a dog, I want you to sit, good. I want you to down, good. It could also mean, hey, I like the way you're interacting with that other dog, or I like the way that you're interacting with that kid, or I like the way you're walking past that man today. Good. Keep doing what you're doing. Now, this is associated with a reward in the beginning, but then we fade away that reward pretty quickly. So here we get dopamine, but no energy, which is really nice because there's a lot of circumstances where we say YES and the dog goes, woo! whoa, right? And they get totally into it, but that might not be the marker I want to use when they finally start doing something calmly, sniffing or showing some curiosity or walking past somebody. Why would I want to adrenalize a dog that I finally got calm? This marker can help us do that. It can help us tell the dog, you are on the right track, you're doing awesome, we're not done yet, but I also don't want you to go crazy with the reward, okay? Our last marker is going to be our NOPE marker, our NOPE marker. This is our correction marker. This is going to tell a dog, I don't like what you did, okay? I'm going to give you a correction. And for this course's sake, our corrections are simply going to either be a poke, a leash correction, or possibly some walking into the dog with our body, okay? But by pairing the NOPE with a correction often enough, later on down the road when I say NOPE, the dog feels corrected whether I correct them or not. Also extremely valuable for rehabilitation purposes. So with these three markers, we need to make sure that classical conditioning is actually taking place, meaning that we have to have our timing correct. In order for classical conditioning to take place, the sound must come first, and then the action that follows must be tied in after the sound. So whatever we're trying to achieve, if we're trying to achieve a reward response, the reward would come after the YES. If we're trying to create a correction response, the correction would come after the NOPE. So it would be yes, reward, yes, reward, yes, reward, or good reward, good reward, good reward, or nope, correction, nope, correction, nope, correction. Okay? By doing those, we will wind up changing the brain, the fluctuation of energy, the fluctuation of hormones within the brain to start getting emotional responses from the dog. These are completely different from commands. Commands are neutral words that are said before a dog has done a behavior. These are coaching words, emotional words that are said after a dog has done a behavior to tell them how they did. So these are going to change our dogs significantly better than our commands ever could. And if we master these three, well, we can probably teach our dogs to fly if we want to.